Organizers from SRM University, scholars, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to speak to you today on the Nobel Peace Prize 2022. Let me begin with the basics. The Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for 2022 to one individual and two organizations. The individual winner is the human rights advocate Ales Bialyatsky from Belarus, and the two organizational winners are the Russian Human Rights Organization Memorial and the Ukrainian Human Rights Organization Center for Civil Liberties. The announcement described the prize motivation as follows, and I quote from the Nobel website. The Peace Prize laureates represent civil society in their home countries. They have, for many years, promoted the right to criticize power and protect the fundamental rights of citizens. They have made an outstanding effort to document war crimes, human rights abuses, and the abuse of power. Together, they demonstrate the significance of civil society for peace and democracy. I close the quotes. By awarding the Nobel Peace Prize for 2022 to Ales Bialyatsky Memorial and the Center for Civil Liberties, the Norwegian Nobel Committee has tried to honor three champions of human rights, democracy, and peaceful coexistence. Through their consistent efforts in favor of humanist values, anti-militarism, and the principles of law, this year's laureates or last year's laureates are recognized to have revitalized and honored Alfred Nobel's vision of peace and fraternity between nations, a vision most needed in the world today. Let me take you through the specific accomplishments of each of the winners from the perspective of the Nobel Prize Committee. First, Ales Bialyatsky. Bialyatsky was one of the initiators of the democracy movement that emerged in Belarus in the mid-1980s. He has devoted his life to promoting democracy and peaceful development in his home country. Among other things, he founded the organization Vyasna or Spring in 1996 in response to the controversial constitutional amendments that gave the president dictatorial powers and that triggered widespread demonstrations. Vyasna provided support for the jailed demonstrators and their families. In the years that followed, Vyasna evolved into a broad-based human rights organization that documented and protested against the authorities' use of torture against political prisoners. Government authorities have repeatedly sought to silence Ales Bialyatsky. He was imprisoned from 2011 to 2014. Following large-scale demonstrations against the regime in 2020, he was again arrested. He is still on detention without trial. Despite tremendous personal hardship, Bialyatsky has not yielded an inch in his fight for human rights and democracy in Belarus. Second, Memorial. The human rights organization Memorial was established in 1987 by human rights activists in the former Soviet Union who wanted to ensure that the victims of the communist regime's oppression would never be forgotten. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Andrei Sakharov and human rights advocate Svetlana Ganushkina were among the founders. Memorial is based on the notion that confronting past crimes is essential in preventing new ones. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Memorial grew to become the largest human rights organization in Russia. In addition, to establishing a center of documentation on victims of the Stalinist era, Memorial compiled and systematized information on political oppression and human rights violations in Russia. Memorial became the most authoritative source of information on political prisoners in Russian detention facilities. The organization has also been standing at the forefront of efforts to combat militarism and promote human rights and government based on rule of law. When civil society must give way to autocracy and dictatorship, peace is often the next victim. During the Chechen Wars, Memorial gathered and verified information on abuses and war crimes perpetrated on the civilian population by Russian and pro-Russian forces. In 2009, the head of Memorial's branch in Chechnya, Natalia Estimirova, was killed because of this work. Civil society actors in Russia have been subjected to threats, imprisonment, disappearance, and murder for many years. As part of the government's harassment of Memorial, the organization was stamped early on as a foreign agent. In December 2021, the authorities decided that Memorial was to be forcibly liquidated and the documentation center closed permanently. The closures became effective in the following months, but the people behind Memorial refused to be shut down. In a comment on the forced dissolution, Chairman Jan Raczynski stated, "Nobody plans to give up." Third, the Center for Civil Liberties. The center was founded in Kiev in 2007 for the purpose of advancing human rights and democracy in Ukraine. The center has taken a stand to strengthen Ukrainian civil society and pressure the authorities to make Ukraine a full-fledged democracy. To develop Ukraine into a state governed by rule of law, Center for Civil Liberties has actively advocated that Ukraine become affiliated with the International Criminal Court. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the Center for Civil Liberties engaged in efforts to identify and document Russian war crimes against the Ukrainian civilian population. In collaboration with international partners, the center is playing a pioneering role with a view to holding the guilty parties accountable for their crimes. Now, what are the elements that strike you about the Nobel Peace Prize 2022? First, it has focused on the neighbor countries, Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, all of which are in the Eastern Europe, Northern Asia belt, broadly within the erstwhile Soviet Union. Geographically, therefore, it is highly focused to the complete exclusion of the rest of the world. Second, the winners are all from civil society. None are part of the political mainstream, not even part of the political opposition. The Nobel Peace Prize website emphasized this. The Peace Prize laureates represent civil society in their home countries. This is what the website says. Together, they demonstrate the significance of civil society for peace and democracy. The United Nations chief followed suit in a message of congratulations that this year's recognition shines a spotlight on the power of civil society, which he calls the oxygen of democracy to advance peace. This emphasis on civil society, or perhaps despite the emphasis, I should say, brings us to the third distinguishing and inescapable feature, the essentially political nature of the Nobel Peace Prize. The repercussions of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine is the inescapable backdrop for the Nobel Peace 2022. Reports that the Russian government asked Jan Raczynski to decline the Nobel Prize only further strengthen this view. Let us look at these observations through a historical perspective. Alfred Nobel was a wealthy Swedish industrialist and the inventor of dynamite. He was himself a subject of controversy due to his gained wealth from an invention that is used in conflicts and wars. In Nobel's will, which dedicated a large share of his wealth to a series of prizes, one part was dedicated to the person who shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for holding and promotion of peace congresses. Since the first award in 1901, the conferment of the Nobel Prize has often engendered criticism, and the most notorious controversies have been over prizes for literature, peace, and economics. Beyond disputes over which contributor's work was more worthy, critics most often discerned political bias and Eurocentrism in the result. In particular, the Nobel Peace Prize controversies often reach beyond the academic community. Criticism that have been leveled against some of the awards include allegations that they were politically motivated, premature, or guided by a faulty definition of what constitutes work for peace. The prize committee has been accused of being politically motivated, subjective, and sometimes basing the award on aspiration rather than achievements. I want to take you through some conferments. Interesting because they stretch beyond controversy to reach absurdity. Mahatma Gandhi never received the Nobel Peace Prize, although he was nominated 5 or perhaps 12, accounts vary, 12 times, and the reports vary about this. In 1948, when the committee ended up not making an award, they decided not to spend the prize money for 1948 at all. It is speculated that what many thought should have been Mahatma Gandhi's place on the list of Nobel Peace Laureates was silently but respectfully left open in 1948. Decades later, the Nobel Committee publicly declared its regret for the omission. The secretary of the Norwegian Nobel Committee said in 2006, "The greatest omission in our 106-year-old history is undoubtedly that Mahatma Gandhi never received the Nobel Peace Prize. Gandhi could do without the Nobel Peace Prize, but whether the Nobel Committee can do without Gandhi is the question." On the other hand, the Nobel Peace Committee seems to have suffered from neither self-doubt nor hesitation when it awarded Barack Obama in 2009 based on a nomination made within 12 days of his becoming President of the United States. It also raised questions due to Obama administration's involvement in wars in Libya, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and Yemen. What the New York Times called a stunning surprise surprised even the winner. But as a true politician, Obama had no qualms in accepting the award. It may also be noted in 2009, unlike in 2022, the Nobel Peace Committee does not seem to have been convinced of the pivotal role of civil society activism and instead saw potential in mainstream political activity. More accurately, prospective mainstream political activity. Other controversial winners include an award given in 1994 to Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres for their work on the Oslo Peace Accords. The Oslo Accords are believed to have been the direct cause of Rabin's assassination. Evidence that the effort which won the Nobel was opposed internally within his own country. There are many such controversies. Perhaps it will come as no surprise to you that Hitler was nominated too in 1939. And given Nobel's history, it will also come as no surprise that 1939 also saw no winner, just as in 1948 when Gandhiji was nominated. If 1948 was left without nominating or selecting a winner out of respect for the Mahatma, what did the same gesture mean in 1939 when Hitler was nominated and did not win? I leave it to the winner's spot was left open. I leave it to you to think about this. But do the controversies and blatant omissions take away the merit of the many worthies who did win based on genuine accomplishment rather than politics? I would say no. In 1964, Martin Luther King was recognized for his non-violent struggle for civil rights for the Afro-American population. Mother Teresa in 1979 for her work to bring help to suffering humanity. Nelson Mandela and Frederick de Klerk for their work for the peaceful termination of the apartheid regime and for laying the foundations for a new democratic South Africa. If not in absolute terms, you would agree these awards were richly deserved relative to some of the winners that we saw earlier. I hope that my discourse so far has made you view the Nobel Peace Prize in perspective. It is an award that is worthy and noble, which nonetheless, like most human initiative, is flawed with human error and the politics of circumstances and history. For those of you who aspire to win the Nobel Peace Prize, despite its limitations, let me address the question, how do you get the Nobel Peace Prize? Note that the announcement for the winners comes a full year after the process starts. September the year prior kicks things off, and that is when you will need to be ready, as the Nobel Committee invites more than 6,000 individuals to submit names, maybe your name too, for consideration. You can't nominate yourself. Okay, you have to be nominated by someone who is either a past winner or a member of the Nobel Committee, holder of a chair in chosen prestigious universities, a national governing body member, and other selected notable scientists and leaders in each of the categories. You have until January 31st when submissions are due. The committee then screens nominations, sometimes over 1,000 names, and gets a working list up to 300 names depending on the field. By spring, that list gets whittled down to maybe 15 names with the help of expert consultation. The recommendations are given to the prize awarding institutions, which determine the final selections. In the Peace Prize's case, it is the Norwegian Nobel Peace Prize Committee. Once you have secured your victory, keep your calendar clear for a December award ceremony where you will officially become a Nobel laureate and can embrace your cash prize, diploma, and a gold medal. Good luck. Jai Hind.